Thank you.
Yes, I think that's good. We should reduce taxes, and that's the best place for the money to be, is back in the hands of the people who are productive, and they know better how to spend the money than we do. But you mentioned cutting the payroll taxes, and that's fine. I'm for that, but you got to cut the spending. And I'm not, I would support the fair tax over the current system, but I'm really not all that gung-ho about replacing the income tax with a sales tax. I'm interested in reducing spending, which means, back again to foreign policy, we have to change our foreign policy so that we don't spend $1 trillion a year overseas. But that would stimulate the economy. I mean, just think if tomorrow nobody else had to pay any more payroll taxes or any income tax. You say, oh, how's the government going to exist? Well, quite frankly, we're not existing very well the way we're going right now, and we're in a form of a bankruptcy, and we're on the verge of destroying the dollar. So I would say that we could do a lot better than we're doing right now.
Shelby Township, Michigan, your question.
Hey, good morning, folks.
Morning.
The Republicans are so big on deregulation. Why stop at the financial institution and American industrial? Let's just deregulate American roads. We'll take down stop signs and red lights. We'll take down the speed limit signs, because I don't need the government to tell me how to drive. Government don't need to tell me what lane to drive in. If we did that, our roads would run as smooth. It'd be a Republican utopia. If you want to bring jobs back to this country, what you have to do is reinstate tariffs. You increase tariffs where it doesn't make any sense to take jobs out of this country. The money you get from tariffs could be used to pay down the debt, and then you could cut taxes that way.
Thank you.
Well, the tariff is a legal process given to us by the Constitution, and if you had a small uniform tariff and not a protective tariff, that's how we financed our early government. But then, once again, you have to have a much smaller government. But, as far as regulation, I don't think it's a fair comparison to say that that the states means if you deregulate, that the states then would say that 6-year-old kids can drive on highways at 100 miles an hour. I mean, that doesn't, I think, translate into the type of regulation that we propose up here in Washington. After Enron, all the individuals guilty in Enron were prosecuted under current law, which were fraud laws, and they went to jail, and the market took care of the value of the company. But what did the Republicans do? They immediately passed Sarbanes-Oxley, which chased more businesses. If you're concerned about jobs going overseas, you don't want Sarbanes-Oxley, because that chases people overseas. People go overseas to start businesses because it's so hard to start businesses here, and they go to other countries. So if you want to do that, just like yesterday, we passed this bill that says buy American only, which, that sounds real good. Oh, buy the steel from America for all this infrastructure. Well, I don't think we should be doing it. But if you say buy American only, what if the Americans don't build the steel? Or what if you pay twice as much from an American company as you pay from overseas? So you have unintended consequences with these well-intended ideas. But that's why you don't want government regulating and designing these programs to tell people how to spend their money.
Next question comes from Vancouver, Washington, Independent Line.
Congressman Paul, I appreciate your stand on civil liberties and your critique of American empire, as well as your critique of the private banks that comprise the Federal Reserve. However, my understanding of American history is that the average American citizen's only recourse against giant monopoly capitalism is through the government, through antitrust legislation and regulation. So I want to ask you, don't you feel the slightest embarrassment at basically, being a useful idiot for Wall Street? That's all the small business people advocate policies that benefit Wall Street and these bankers.
It sounds like you're awfully close to us, and you need to study the idea of monopolies a little bit more, because there's good literature out there, because monopolies do exist, but none of them exist unless the government gives them to us. So the government isn't there to design the size of the business. If the business is big, it's big for one reason in a free market, because it provides a product at the right price. The price is low. But what you want to make sure, there's always free entry. But just because somebody like Microsoft, because they're big, there's antitrust laws passed, filed against Microsoft. Well, Microsoft was built because you and I were we were buying their products. But you don't want government to come in and say how much business that Microsoft should have, but you have to have free entry. But the monopoly that you should be concerned about, and you did express concern, is the monopoly over money and credit through the Federal Reserve, which then props up the monopolies in the banks. So sure, there's a monopoly type of system in the banking system because they're licensed to do fractional reserve banking. So if you're concerned about bigness of banks and protection, you have to look to the Fed, you have to look to the monetary system, you have to understand why fractional reserve system is given to us by the government, but it's not the free market. So your concern is correct. Be concerned about monopolies, but if you look deeply, you're going to find out that any true monopoly can't exist without the protection of government.
Ohio, Congressman Ron Paul.
Good morning, and thank you. Sounds like, Senator, that you and the rest of the Senate Republicans, some of you are going to vote for the stimulus package. Why can't you folks up there stand like the House Republicans did yesterday and vote as a block against this stimulus package? This package is built with a lot of pork in there that has absolutely nothing to do with stimulus in the economy. It's just something the Democrats threw in there to get through packages that in the past they were not able to get through, and are simply using this built-up crisis as a way to gouge out more money out of our pocketbooks.
I don't think I can disagree with anything you said, except for the fact that they're not going to let me vote today. If I went over to the Senate to vote, they'd kick me out because I'm not in the Senate. I'm in the House. I voted against that package yesterday, and you're right. Earlier in the program, I indicated that was a slight movement toward hope for the Republican Party, that we all stuck together yesterday and voted against it. But I also complained that we should have been doing that about 8 years ago, voting against all this spending, and we wouldn't have gotten into this mess. But you're right, exactly right about how much of a boondoggle all this spending is, and it's nothing more than pork. And believe me, it was a little over 800. CBO estimates it over $1 trillion. The Senate wants a bigger bill. So believe me, this is going to be much closer to $1.5 trillion before it's all over. And we don't have the money. We're flat out broke. The money is either going to be borrowed or printed, and it's not going to work because we're taking taking money from the productive citizens and putting it into non-productive people, the politicians, and it hasn't worked before. It didn't work in the Depression, made things worse, so we have embarked on an incorrect course.
Not much time left for Congressman Paul. Next call, Rumson, New Jersey.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
I think the American public is getting a little wise to the fact that your mantra of government is the problem is an absurdity. Government has never been the problem. The problem is that people take office who aren't willing to govern. And the result of the ideology that started with the celluloid cowboy Reagan and his supply-side economic ideology is why we are in the situation we are now. The laboratories that Milton Friedman had in Venezuela, Argentina, Chile, Guatemala, Indonesia. Well, it's happening here now. You first come in and get rid of all of the regulations and oversight. You destroy labor unions. You decimate the working class. It's a corporatocracy and an oligarchy that you've created.
Caller, I need to jump in because we won't have time for an answer. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I don't think we can fully discuss socialism versus freedom, and you're for socialism. I am not. But you're mixed up about Ronald Reagan. I voted against all his budgets. He talked good about the marketplace, but deficits skyrocketed. He expanded government. The biggest office building here in Washington, D.C. is named after Ronald Reagan. So there's some confusion out there about Ronald Reagan being a great capitalist. He was a friend, and he was supportive and talking good, but believe me, government grew by leaps and bounds. So if you don't like what happened with Ronald Reagan, it's because the government grew, just as it did under both Bushes. Government has grown because they acted like Democrats. They did exactly what you're talking about. They've expanded government. They expanded regulations, and we're not talking about that. We're talking about the Constitution, the rule of law, individual liberty, personal civil liberties. We're talking about not wasting all this money overseas, but you got to have a little confidence in freedom. If you have confidence in freedom of the individual to run his own life and not be told how the government to what they can do with their life, Why do you want to tell everybody what to do with their money? That's how we got in this trouble. If you like the Grand Depression, your support for what you're talking about will take this recession and turn it into a depression, because we had all the evil intervention of Herbert Hoover, spending and taxing and regulating and tariffs. And then we had Roosevelt, and he expanded everything Hoover did. So there is no doubt. History is on our side of this argument that fascism and communism and socialism and welfarism and intervention in the bedroom and policing the world, it's coming to an end because we can't afford it. The Soviet system collapsed because their government was too big. Our system is on the verge of collapse because we can't afford this monstrous government any longer.
That's it for our time. Thank you very much for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Congressman Ron Paul of Texas. And thanks for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time for the Washington Journal.